Hi guys and welcome back. So I've just bought the cheapest Bmw 135i in the country, and as you can probably tell, it's not got an engine in it. So the main goal with this car, as you can probably tell, is to rebuild the engine that I've got with it and put it back into the car, because right now it's in about a million different pieces. But this is quite a rare car. This car is actually a really rare spec. It's black interior, black on the outside, and the best part, it's got a manual gearbox. Save all the manuals. You're probably wondering then, how much have I actually paid for this thing in its current state? Well, good question. I've only paid £3,000 for this car with the engine on it. Bearing in mind, of course, it is missing quite a few things right now that I need to source for the car and that we need to put back on. Let me show you then everything that we've got for this car that we need to put back together to hopefully get this car up and running again and back on the road. So then in the engine bay, as you can see, it's still got the gearbox with the car, and it is a manual gearbox. A lot of the stuff in here is taken out and it's all been stripped down. The front end is in the car as well, which I'll show you. This could quite easily be my biggest mistake so far, but I love my BMWs, and even more than that, I love a straight six with a turbo on it, and this has got a twin turbo, which makes it even more exciting. Let's hop on the inside there. Inside of here then, it's black leather interior, it's an M Sport, black roof lining, it's got the iDrive in it, and the best part, it's got the manual gearbox. Right, so at face value, it does actually look pretty good, but bear in mind, I have had a few issues with this car, to be honest. So basically, the guy that actually bought the car off, half the stuff didn't actually come with the car, and I've had an absolute nightmare trying to get half the stuff back off him, which has taken me probably 2 or 3 weeks to get pretty much everything he's got for this car off him. And in the end, half of it is actually been missing, so I've had to go elsewhere and source different things on it. And I may have been ripped off a little bit, because when I went to view this car, basically the engine, you know, it was all in different pieces. There was the bottom end split down and the top end split down, and you know, it was all covered in oil, this, that, the other. And I didn't notice until I'd actually got the engine back, and basically one of the pistons had a hole in it, which I think the guy's tried to cover up and isn't very honest about that. Because he said to me, yeah, it's completely fine in that. Maybe I should have been a bit more in detail and checked it a bit more. But, you know, at the end of the day, I'll just try and be honest about everything. And I wish other people would be the same, at least if they know that so much anyway. So I've had to source another piston for it and do basically a complete bottom end rebuild, which is going to be an absolute nightmare to do. But, you know, it is what it is at the end of the day. We are where we are, and we've got to go on. So after finding that out, as you can imagine, I was pretty gutted. Sometimes we learn these things the hard way. So I've stripped the engine down, and it's all in the garage behind me. A few of the main things that are missing on this car then is the front brakes on it, which I'll show you now. Right, on the front then, this is meant to have much bigger brakes than what it's actually got now, which I've managed to source for the car, and I've paid about £500 for them because they're pretty rare and difficult to get hold of. So I think these are just standard 1 series brakes. From factory then, these cars usually have 6-pot brake calipers on the front, which have been taken off, and some other ones have been put on it. So I've had to source another set of those. Anyway, enough of me nattering. I'm going to show you all of the bits that we got to throw back together and the stuff that we've actually got with it in the car. I've got the bumper, I've got most of the interior bits, and you know, nothing too interesting inside of here anyway. Of course, the battery being disconnected, the window's not going to do it properly. But what we need to do first of all is actually get the engine in the car and this thing up and running. On the boot then as well, still got a 135i badge. I think it's not an M Performance exhaust, it's just standard exhaust on the car. And rather annoyingly, I've tried to get into the boot of this thing, and at the minute I'm locked out of it. So that's another thing that we're going to need to solve, because it was actually working okay, but the headlights and the rad pack basically are in the boot. How we retain this out, so that's another thing that we're going to need to fix before we can actually get this thing on the road. A bit annoying, but it is what it is at the end of the day. In here then, we've got an absolute array of things that we need to put back together and get on the car. The main thing then is the engine itself is here, and it's all stripped down now, and this is the bottom end pretty much stripped down. So I've taken the pistons all out of here. We've got new rings to go on and new bottom end bearings. I've honed all of these out, so it's nice and clean now. We've got the head here, which is in pieces, and it's had a fresh skim on it, all cleaned up, and it's pretty much ready to go on, because I'm a strong believer in do it once and do it properly. So what we need to do basically is combine the two of these, put everything back together, and then get this in the car. As well as that then, all of the sumps down here. In here then, we've got all of the pistons and con rods, as well as the oil pump, all of that sort of stuff here. And we've got new piston rings, which we need to fit. We've got the cams down here. In this box is pretty much a lot of stuff for the engine. Now for the bulk of it then, that needs to go back together. So I'm going to quickly run you through everything. Here are the bigger brakes that you can see for the car. I managed to get these for about £400, and they came with the discs and pads, but I've gone for the new pads. Discs themselves, they don't look too bad, but I'm probably going to paint these anyway to freshen them up. Thankfully though, it's still got the rear ones on the car, so I shouldn't have to worry about those. Okay then, so as you can see here, I've got another head gasket for the car, and I've had to buy 2 because the head itself has needed such a big skim. I've needed to get a thicker head gasket. Down here as well, we've got the oil cooler, head bolts are in here, and then we've got some vacuum point, which is probably going to need for all the other little bits in between. A pair of good working turbos down here, as well as some other turbos that I've kind of got given by a guy, basically spares because they're knackered and I needed most of the coolant and oil lines off of them. Down here as well we've got two different variations of caps for the car. We've got the decap pipes there and the standard ones down here, as well as the intake pipes, rocker cover, and most of the cooling system for the engine down here, and you know, a lot of intake stuff down here which is all mixed up. Another thing that I'm going to be doing then is, while I'm rebuilding this, I'm also going to put a bigger front mount intercooler on the car, because I figured if I've got it in bits now, I might as well put a bigger intercooler on it to get it out of the way. Further down the line, it's going to make my life a lot easier. As well as that, under there's a clutch and flywheel, which we need to put in the car, and I think it's got a Sachs performance clutch, which I managed to actually get with this car, thankfully. I've had to source loads of stuff for this car separately, and I've pretty much got most of it together now, so what we can do is we can start to rebuild the engine with it. I have heard really good things about these N54 engines. Apparently they can take about 700 brake on standard internals, which I think is amazing for a standard engine. My main plan then is to rebuild a pretty standard engine, get this car on the road, through its MOT, and then we can look at doing other bits to it, like putting hybrid turbos on it, some downpipes on it, and getting some decent power figures out of this. So today, what I'm going to be doing is rebuilding the engine for the cheap 135i that I've just bought. It is an N54 engine, which is basically a 3-litre twin turbo, and it's mainly regarded as being the modern day 2JZ engine, which I'm sure everyone's heard of. So then, as you can see, right now we need to put all the pistons, rings, and rods back into this and get this engine bottom end complete. And we've had a little bit of drama with this engine when I got it. It was pretty much complete bottom end, but I found out that one of the pistons had a massive hole in it, so I've had to strip it down pretty much. So then here we have the culprit, and as you can see, it's got a huge hole in the bottom of it. Have a look at that. Just in there, it's got a gaping old hole in it. What I've done, I've got another piston, I've swapped it out and put it on the rod and the crank. And what I need to do now then is put the new rings in and get all of that stuff back into the block. So the block itself is all honed out now and it's ready to go. The bad piston itself came out of cylinder 3, which is here, and I managed to just get away with honing it, and it hasn't actually done too much damage. So if I'm honest, I'd say I've got really lucky there. Anyway, let me show you the new rings and basically all the bearings that we're going to be putting back into this engine. Right, so the rings that we're going to be using are literally just some mild pistons that are standard size that I've got off eBay, and a set of 6 of them cost £100. I went for these ones over the OEM ones because basically when I called BMW up at the dealership, they wanted £86 for one set of rings. Not a complete set, but one set of rings. So times 6, what's that? I don't know. Let's say we're looking at about £300 or £400 basically, and I thought it's not even worth it. These should be more than good enough and up to the job then anyway. What I've also done is I've labelled all of the rods and pistons where they came out from. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 basically, so I know where they're going to go back in. We've also got new rod bolts to go on as well, and some new King bottom end bearings, because these are usually known to fail in the M54. Right then, let's get the new rings in, new rod bearings in, and then we can put everything back into the block and put it back together. Thankfully as well, all of the rings are labelled in the correct order of where they need to go. So we've got the top ring, the middle ring, and the bottom ring. Let's get these rings back on the pistons and into that block. Right then, so it's time then to fit the new rings to the piston, as well as the new bearings and the bolts. So the other thing you've got to be careful on these is, if you have a look there, you can see that each one of these is labelled lower and upper. So we've got to make sure that we put these on the correct way. But first what we need to do is we need to fit the rings. And as you can see as well, each one of these is labelled in the correct orientation. So we've got like A, B, C for example. So we're going to put the rings on, put the bearings in, and then we can get all of the pistons into each cylinder where they belong. Right then, so the rings are all in now. Time to change out the old bearings and the bolts. So now they're all in, all we need to do is basically see each little indent on each one. We need to put them together and we can put some new bolts in and they're ready to go. Okay then, so that's one of the pistons and the rods done. That's complete and ready to go back in. Now what we need to do is do the others, and then we can put them back into the block. Okay then, so if you've made it this far, of course, don't forget to tap down below, hit like and subscribe, and you'll see all of the other bits that we've got coming up. As you can probably tell as well at this point, I'm kind of regretting things a little bit, but hopefully in the long run this will all be worth it, and it will be pretty much as quick as an M2, but on a budget. Right then, now we've got all of that back in, all we need to do is torque the rod bolts up. All we need to torque them to then is 20 Newton meters, 70 degrees, and then another 20 degrees. Once we've done that, we can get the oil pump and the baffle plate back on along with the sump, and that's pretty much the bottom end complete. Let's get those bolts torqued up. Okay then, so if you're like me and you don't actually have a compass to do any angles or anything, what I tend to try and do is take my phone to the tool that I'm using and basically try and work it out in degrees off that basically. So for example, if I'm at like 134 degrees, then I need to go to 204 degrees. I've always done that pretty much and it seems to work for me. I should probably buy a proper compass, but for now, this works really well for me. Anyway, let's get them torqued up. Now I know all of the tech whizzes are going to come out and say this ain't the proper way to do it, but this works fine for me and I've never really had any issues out of it, so I'm going to carry on doing it. Right then, now I've done all that, it's pretty much the bottom end complete. All we need to do now to complete the bottom end is put the oil pump back on along with a baffle plate and this sump. Now that we're pretty much down to the last little bit of it, of course, I'm going to make sure that everything here is done properly. So all I've done basically is I've checked the oil feed, basically that goes to the oil pump, which I'm putting on now. All of that's clean, it's all okay, because if I've got the sump off, I want to check that it's nice and clean, not blocked up. Apart from that, it's just doing the bolts up and it's a reverse thread on the oil pump itself. Okay then, so now the bottom end is complete, what we need to do is put the head gasket and the head back on, as well as do the timing chain up and sort the timing on this engine out. Before I put the head gasket on, I've pretty much turned the engine to where I think it should belong, and that's cylinder 1 in top dead centre. Unfortunately for us, there aren't actually any timing marks on here, so we need to get the flywheel back on to actually get the timing in the right spot, but as far as I can tell, it kind of looks roughly there because there's a dowel which is in the right spot. That's facing directly up basically. So what I've done, I've put cylinder 1 in top dead centre. I'm going to put the head on now, and then I'm going to get this up on an engine crane. We'll put the flywheel on, and then we can sort all the timing out, put this back on the engine stand, and put the rest of the bits on, such as turbo, inlet manifold. First though, what we're going to do is we're going to get the cylinder head back on with a new gasket, torque everything up in here, and then we can sort the timing out on the engine properly. I'm also using a thicker head gasket because of how much material has to come off the head. So this one itself is 1.2 mil, and the one that came with it is about 1 mil. But sometimes you need to do things the proper way. Anyway, let's get this on and get it all torqued up. And when it does come down to doing everything properly, of course, we want to make sure that both of the maintenance surfaces for the head and the block are all nice and clean, which they are. As well as that, we want to make sure that the threaded holes that the bolts are going into are all free of any debris. So what I've done, I've quickly cleaned them out and blown them out, and we don't have any issues there. I always tend to find though, if you keep a clean environment, things usually tend to go to plan well. Apart from now, of course, anyway. So I've run into another issue, as I usually do. The head bolts for this are too long, so I think I've been sent the wrong head bolts. The ones that I've ordered are meant to be for an M54. I don't know if there's a difference in them at all, but these ones are definitely too long, so I'll show you what I mean. So look, if you look at these, yeah, these are literally threaded in by hand. And if you can see in that gap, there's still about another 15-20 mil to go, and to me it should be nothing like that. What I think's happened then is I've ordered these N54 head bolts, and they might be for a slightly different engine, but as I've ordered them, it was for an N54. So unfortunately, when you order things off eBay, sometimes this is what happens. So what I'm going to try and do is tomorrow I'm going to go and get some more head bolts, hopefully for, you know, this car, hopefully the correct ones that is anyway. I'm going to take these out, you know, they've only been done by hand, get them off, and then we can hopefully get everything back together. Okay, so we're back and we've had a bit of luck. Weirdly enough though, the only place I've actually managed to get the correct head bolts is from BMW, and that's the main dealer. So I've only paid, to be fair, 49 something pound basically for these bolts, which isn't too bad from main dealer, but I'll show you what I mean about how short they are. Okay then, so quick side by side, as you can see, these ones here are actually the correct bolts, and they're far shorter than the ones that we've got here. Anyway, that's one of the problems solved. Let's get the head bolts in and get everything tied up. Anyway then, it's only one little hiccup along the way, so it's no drama, and we're starting to get back on track to where we should actually be. All I'm hoping though is that we don't run into any other issues along the way, or, well, too many other issues, let's hope so. Okay then, so the head's all torqued down now. All we need to do is put the lifters and the cams back in. Okay then, so all the cams and lifters are back in now. What I need to do is sort the timing out. Unfortunately, what I think I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to put this on an engine crane just to try and sort the timing out, and then we can put it back onto the stand, and I'll have to take the flywheel off again. So basically the timing on this car, there's a little tab here which goes through to the flywheel. So I need to put the flywheel actually onto here to get the timing in the perfect spot, which is quite annoying because, as you can see, there's no room here. So I'm going to quickly put this on an engine crane, get it up in the air, whack the flywheel on quickly, get it in the right spot, and then we can take the flywheel back off, put it back on here, and basically put everything else back together. It might be a bit easier to build everything else up on here, and then we get it towards the front of the car, we can put the flywheel and clutch back on that way. But I want to make sure that the timing is in the perfect spot anyway. Right, now I've got the engine off the stand and I've got the flywheel back on. As well as that, I've put this bit on here for the timing. This is basically to do with the cam timing, and it's got a couple of pins which locate, I think, the van off or something like that. And these things here literally slide straight over the cam. But the main reason why I've taken it off and put the flywheel back on is because there's a little doubt in the back of it. And because I'm not too familiar with these engines, I want to be 100% that everything's okay. So down here, there's literally just a little dowel pin that slides into the back of the flywheel. Unfortunately, this is the only timing mark on the engine, but it does look like I was right about basically, there's a dowel on here and that faces directly up, but it's pretty hard to tell how accurate that actually is. So I've gone with a safe bet and pretty much just put the flywheel back on with a couple of bolts and put this pin in so it's 100%. If I was to do this again in future though, at least I know that this is pretty much directly lined, so you could probably make something to go in there and down there to bolt it in. Anyway, it's a lot easier anyway to just put the flywheel back on, a couple of bolts in there, put this on the back of it, and it's 100%, it's going to be in the right spot. And when we come to doing the cam timing, this is all locked off now, so they're facing up. And around the back here, as you can see, as well, the cams are facing at each angle down, which is how it should be. And then here, all I need to do is basically tighten the front bolts up, and then I can take all the timing stuff off, put the tensioner back in, and we can get it back on here and build the rest of the engine up. Okay then, so I've tightened everything up now and I've turned the engine over a couple of times and everything is perfect in my opinion. I'll literally turn it 2-3 times and I'll take this off like it is now, no bolts or anything like that, and it will literally slide straight back in, which is really satisfying. All we need to do now then is get the engine back on the engine stand, get that flywheel back off and build the rest of the engine back up, and then we should be able to get it straight into the car. Now is a bit then where I've got to try and figure out where all of the random pieces have got to go back onto this engine, and this is actually my first time working on one of these. But I think it's a pretty interesting engine as it's got a twin turbo setup, which in a weird way is pretty much like a Skyline, because if you look at the old GTRs, they're both, well, all three of them are straight six twin turbos, which I've got a lot of time for. But anyway, my reasoning on this car, kind of being like an M2, if you think about it, is if you look at the slightly newer 135Is, they've got the same engine as the M2s do, which is an N55 engine, same engine pretty much, but a single turbo. And of course, this is the older 135i, which is the twin turbo. Yeah, I know it is a little bit out there, of course it's just a theory, but anyway, let me know what you think down below, if you agree with me or you disagree. Either way, I think it's kind of like a nice sort of in between, but if there is any car out there this is actually like, it's a BMW 1M, which you might or might not know, but they're pretty rare, and I think they made a limited run of them about the same sort of time this came out, which is where the engine comes from, funnily enough. Okay then, so the engine's pretty much complete and ready to go in. All I need to do now then is put the clutch and the flywheel on it, and then we can lift it into the car. Hopefully it shouldn't be too hard. Anyway, let me show you what I've quickly done to it. Okay, so what I've also decided to do for now is leave the wiring loom off here as well as the inlet manifold, just so we don't damage it or anything like that, because it is plastic and it can be quite brittle, as well as getting the wiring loom out of the way, and it should be easy enough to plug on and make more sense while it's actually in the car. On this side as well then, it's pretty much complete and the downpipes are on. I've left them slightly loose so I can wiggle them around to try and get them on the downpipe when we wiggle this in, and I'm hoping that we can put these on at the same time we put the gearbox on, and hopefully it will fall together nicely. Okay then, so we've got the flywheel and the clutch on, and I've torqued all of these up. I've used all new flywheel bolts and clutch bolts of course, and I've used some blue Loctite on them on the actual flywheel bolts, because you know you don't want any of this coming loose. And then we've used some new bolts here, took them up to spec, and I've aligned it by eye, and I'm kind of hoping it goes on okay, but we're going to see what happens anyway. Now then, it's time for the big lift. As you can see, trying to get it in, and my partner's giving me a hand, so what I'm basically doing is she's letting it down a little bit as I'm trying to wiggle it in at the back of the car to get the gearbox in place. So we finally managed to get the engine in okay, and it was an absolute struggle to get it in, but we managed to get there in the end, and the engine now is pretty much in. It's all bolted down. All we need to do now then is finish up and put all the other little bits on here. What I had to do as well was remove the steering rack down here to get that engine mount onto the actual mount properly. Apart from that, it was fairly easy to get in. What I need to do now then is complete all the stuff down here. So we need to put the inlet manifold back on, start motor, all of the fuel lines, and pretty much the whole wiring harness, as well as the injectors and all of the boost pipes, and then we should be able to get the rest of it all together and hopefully start it up. Okay then, so let's get the rest of it all back together then, and hopefully it should be fairly quick and easy from here on out. What I've also done then when I've put the engine in is I've put both the downpipes back on the car so it's not in out, and they're tucked behind the steering rack. As well as that, I've just got to wiggle the lambdas over and try and figure out where all of this wiring goes. So then we've pretty much got the wiring loom back on now, but unfortunately the daylight is closing in, so we're going to have to leave it here, and then hopefully tomorrow we can complete all of this stuff here and get the inlet manifold back on. But we've done quite a bit today. We've got the gearbox bolts back on, starter motor back on, oil cooler and the new gaskets on, and of course we've done all the things like the high pressure fuel line down here and the knock sensor. So most of the wiring loom is back on now. What we're going to do then is tomorrow hopefully pick back up from where we are now, get the inlet manifold back on and the rest of the wiring loom down here. As well as that, then we're going to put the injectors back in and the coil packs and complete everything down here. Okay then, so today the weather is absolutely lovely and it might be a little bit windy, but it's nice and dry, it's nice and sunny, it's not too cold at all. So hopefully today we can get quite a large share of this done, is what I'm hoping for anyway. What I'm going to do now then is show you where I'm going to start and kind of the direction that we're going to be taking with this overall. So what I'm going to start off doing is basically putting the injectors back in here along with the coil packs and completing the hot side where the turbo is, as well as putting the boost points back on and sorting all of the lambdas out and hopefully all of that wiring. Hopefully it's not going to take us too long, and maybe by the end of the day we'll actually have an up and running car. Once all of that's done, we can move on to this side here, sort the rest of the wiring out, probably put the ECU back in, sort all of the plugs out, and then we can get the inlet back on and sort the charge pipes out, and then we can move around to the front. Anyway, let's see how we get on, and hopefully we can make a big bit of progress today. First of all then, what I'm starting off by doing is just putting all the injectors in, getting them out of the way, and of course we need to code them when the car's actually on. Okay, so the injectors are all in now, and that's that sorted. Now what we're going to do is put the charge pipe back on. As you can probably see, it looks a bit spicy now because I've covered it in some heat fuel to try and keep the intake temps down anyway. But I thought it looked a bit tatty, so I thought we'd give it a go. And now all we need to do is put it back on. After we put the charge pipe on, we're going to also sort the lambdas out, connect them up here, as well as putting the boost solenoids, which are just down here with the heat shield. Once we've done that, then we can also put the boost solenoids and the heat shield back on here, as well as sorting all the vacuum lines and the lambdas out. Putting the charge pipe back on was actually a lot more tricky than I thought it would be. I wish I'd actually put it on before we put the engine into the car, because it was right up against the steering rack, so I had to wiggle that out of the way to get it on. The charge pipe's in now, and that was an absolute nightmare to get on. To try and get a clamp around the back was awfully tricky, but I got there in the end and it's all okay now. Front one, as you can see, it wasn't too difficult, but that one was quite tricky to reach, and I thought while I'm there, to make my life a bit easier, I thought I'd put one of the rear vacuum pipes on now, because there's not much room there, and I thought while I have a bit of room, I'll try and put it on. Anyway, now we've sorted that, it's time to put the boost solenoids and all that stuff back on here, and followed by the vacuum lines. What I've also done then is replaced all the old vacuum lines with some nice and fresh silicone pipes. Fortunately, the weather today has taken a turn for the worse. I've literally got outside and it started raining. What I'm going to try and do now though, before it absolutely hammers it down on here, I'm going to try and get the engine loom that I've got down there back on here, get all of this stuff connected back up, coil packs in, and the manifold itself back on. After that, I've got this absolute conglomeration of wiring to sort out, as well as the ECU. We've pretty much got a complete engine, it's just time for the finishing touches. I don't think you can probably tell at the minute, I haven't actually got a blower valve on here. I might put one on eventually, I have got one to put on it, but I haven't actually got a pipe for it. So for now, I'm just going to run it without one. It shouldn't do too much damage to the car anyway. I mean, really, it'll just create a bit of compressor surge on it, which is fine. Haters are going to hate, but I don't see the point of blower valve, and I really like noises that the car makes without one, so I'm going to leave it off. And scientifically speaking, we don't need it. Okay then, so now I've got the front end on, we just need to whack all this stuff back on. So I'm talking headlights, front bumper, and of course the radiator, power steering radiator, and all of the aircon. And of course we still need to put the intercooler on, but what I think I need to do first is I need to cut away some of this plastic so we can actually fit it in here properly. What I'm going to try and do first then is I'm going to try and cut away basically at each side, and then we should hopefully be able to wedge it in fairly easily. But I'm pretty sure that it actually mounts up against the bottom of the radiator, so I'm going to get the radiator in first and then we'll go from there. As you can also see, the air filters are all on now, and basically the oil cooler itself is on here, so it's only just bolted in and a couple of bolts down here. Not too much drama there anyway. So now all we need to do is get the rest of the stuff on down here, which hopefully should be fairly easy. Okay then, so I've just cut away quickly at that front brace, as you can see here. I've chopped it off just up here and down here. So the intercooler's in now. All we need to do is put the rad back in here. I've got an aftermarket one to put in, and hopefully it should fit in fairly easily. Okay then, so I've got the alley rad back in now, and that was an absolute nightmare to fit. What I've had to do then to actually fit this in, because it's a bit too big, I've had to trim away loads of plastic off each side and I've wedged it in now and everything's back on. Now then, it's time for the bit we've all been waiting for. Getting the battery on, getting this car started up. But of course, before I actually start the car up, I need to put some oil in here, coolant in here, and then a bit of power steering fluid in, and it should be alright to start the car up. Unfortunately as well, this car doesn't actually have a dipstick, so I'm going to have to double check online how much oil this thing actually takes. I'm pretty sure it's 6.5 litres, but I'm going to check just to be sure. Okay then, so I've pretty much got the front end all back together now. I've got the fan on, I've got the intake on, and I'm pretty much ready to start it. I don't know what it is, but every time I do this, it's always nerve-wracking because you never know if you've done anything properly. Anyway, let's go and see if we can start the car, and hopefully it's going to be alright. Okay then, so it's finally the moment that we've all been waiting for now. Keys ready to go in the ignition, and hopefully we can start this car. Typical BMW there, isn't it? Now this is really embarrassing. So as you can probably tell from a few attempts, this car isn't actually starting. Great start, isn't it? Unfortunately, it doesn't always go to plan, but there's only a few things it could be. Okay then, so I've done a few checks, and what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and ground the engine basically a bit better in case it's like a grounding issue. If it isn't now, I'm pretty sure that it's actually going to be start mode, so I'm going to have to take the inlet off again, these intakes, to double check the starter's okay if the grounding issue doesn't work. So I'm just going to get a cable and like ground this basically to a better earth in case it's like a bad ground or something. I don't know, but you know, more than likely it could actually be the start mode, which is pretty annoying, but at least it's not difficult to get to. Okay then, so good news, I have actually managed to get it started off fairly easily, and it's definitely at fault. I'll show you what I've done then. Okay then, so basically what I've done is I've taken the start motor off and I've given it a quick bench test. What I've done then is I've put a positive on here, I've earthed it, and I've put a live on here, and it wasn't working at all, so it wasn't even turning over. What I've done now then is I've taken this off and this off, I've cleaned up all of the inside, I've tested it again, and now it's actually spinning freely. I'm going to quickly get this back on, put it back on here, throw all this back together, and then we can actually start the car. Okay then, so everything's back together. Round 2, hopefully it should start. As you can see now, it wants to go, it's starting, it's choking a little bit, but then suddenly it starts springing into life. Can you hear it? That little whining is just the power steering pump. Apart from that, seems alright to me. The main good news being then that the car's actually started and it's all up and running. But we're not completely in the clear yet because we still need to finish off rebuilding this car, getting back together, and then getting an MOT on it. Okay, so the car is up and running now. It's pretty healthy in my opinion, and I'm pretty happy with it. That's the engine done. All we need to do now then, of course, is put the front end on, and the main thing being we need to put the brakes back on the car. So that's what we're going to get on with now anyway. I've literally just painted them quickly, and we're going to put them back on, put new pads to go on there, and then we should be able to drop this car down and take it on a drive, and hopefully it should be alright. Anyway, let's get the brakes back on. Right, I'm going to start with the rear then. As you can also tell, I've taken the rears off and I've quickly painted them as well. I've also got new pads down here ready to put in. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get new pads in there, decal on, finish the rears, and then we can move on to the front. Okay then, so now we've got the proper brakes back on. All we need to do is to put the wheels back on and drop the car down. As you can see, she runs like a beauty. All the front end's back on, everything here works, pop the bonnet. As you can see then, everything on here is back on and the engine itself runs absolutely perfectly. The headlights work, the bumper's back on, I need to put the washer jets on, but that's no big deal right now. Oh, look at that smell, it smells beautiful, nothing better than the smell of petrol. As you can probably hear, it's a really loud car on startup. I don't really mind though. Okay then, so now we've got the car all up and running and back together in one piece. All we need to do now then is take it for some MOT, and hopefully it should pass. Anyway, if you liked this video, don't forget to tap down below, hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video, and hopefully we'll have an MOT in this thing. If not, we're going to have to repair it. But we're going to leave it here for now, and I hope you all enjoyed the video, and just want to say a big thank you for watching. In the next one, hopefully we should be able to pick this car up from its MOT, and hopefully it will have passed. But anyway, don't forget to stay tuned, and you can see what's happening with this car. Wish me luck with this, because I'm going to need it, and I'll catch you in the next video. See you in a bit.